I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zayas Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark.
Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to Arcane Mark. Today we're going to be talking about the Champion class.
That's right. It's Class Chat Champion. Champion class is a new class, but it's really an old class, just under a new name, because it is the Paladin class, but with even more breadth of options that can allow you to play a champion that's not just the stereotypical lawful good version of the champion that you may have seen in Pathfinder 1st Edition or previous games. So, when we're looking at the champion, we can see the picture, the really cool giant Seela picture that's here in the book. That's our Paladin champion Seela. So the champion class is one that really underwent an evolution between even the playtest and the final. And that was because of the fact that the playtesters, it wasn't a slam dunk like some of the decisions where, like with the sorcerer changing to go to all the traditions, was like 92% of people were like, do that, that's the best one. But it was still that the playtesters resoundingly but not slam dunkingly decided that it's gotta have the champion that is active for all the different kinds, not just the paladin.
Yeah, so that they wanted to have champion characters that were able to be neutral good or chaotic good as well, right, rather than having those. There was a
reasonably but smaller contingent who did not want that. Mm-hmm. And then there was some people who were like, it's fine, but it can't be called paladin unless it's the original one, and that's part of why the class became known as the champion.
And then the path that is the traditional path maintains the name paladin.
That's right. So before we get into some of the specific details with the champion and the paladin, let's talk about what it is according to the book itself. It says that you're an emissary of a deity, a devoted servant who's taken up a weighty mantle, and you adhere to a code that holds you apart from those around you. While champions exist for every alignment, as a champion of good, you provide certainty and hope to the innocent. You have powerful defenses that you share freely with your allies and innocent bystanders, as well as a holy power you use to end threat of evil. Your devotion even attracts the attention of holy spirits who aid you on your journey. So you can see from the description that the core rulebooks champions are only going to be the good ones.
But there's a strong implication there, and then you see that in the Advanced Player's Guide that there are champions of other alignments.
And it's future-proofed, at least mostly, so that feats that make sense that any champion could take them, regardless of their alignment, are in there, and ones that only the good champions can take actually typically require the tenets of good as or they're supposed to. I think there's a couple that may have missed it as one of their requirements, thus preventing the evil champions from taking them. Even before the evil champions even existed. So in terms of what the game is thinking about for role-playing your champion, during combat encounters, you confront enemies in hand-to-hand combat while carefully positioning yourself to protect your allies. During social encounters, you're a voice of hope, striving to reach a peaceful solution that strengthens bonds and yields good results for all. These are the good champions. While exploring, you overcome barriers, both physical and spiritual, providing inspiration to your allies through your actions and when your fellow adventurers ask for it, providing moral and ethical guidance. Not when they don't ask for it, though, where you're like, I'm the paladin, do what I say or else. In downtime, you spend much of your time in solemn prayer and contemplation, rigorous training, charity work, and fulfilling the tenets of your code, but that doesn't mean there isn't time to take up a craft or a hobby. You might believe there's always hope that good will triumph over evil, no matter how grim the odds. You might know the ends don't justify the means, since evil acts increase the power of evil. You might have a strong sense of right and wrong, and grow frustrated when greed or short-sightedness breeds evil. Others probably see you as a symbol of hope, especially in a time of great need. They probably worry you secretly despise them for not living up to your impossible standard, or that you're unwilling to compromise when necessary. And they probably know you've sworn divine oaths of service they can trust you to keep. That's a big one. That last one, others probably. It really actually, in the narrative, says a lot about you. If someone knows that you're a paladin, they know you've sworn an oath of service, and they can trust that you're going to follow the tenets of the paladin. That can possibly give you just some extra trustworthiness that someone who wasn't a paladin might not
have.
And
even if you're not a paladin, even if you're a champion of a chaotic deity, if you're a liberator, people can trust that you would be someone who's going to uphold the cause of freedom.
That's right. So that is sort of thematically, story-wise, where we're putting in these good champions. So let's take a look at what they have. So they're trained in perception, and they're an expert in fortitude and will, while being trained in reflex. So their mind, their body can shrug off almost anything, but they're not always going to be able to get out of the way as fast as a rogue.
They're not necessarily quite as light on their feet. Although they could be fairly light on their feet still if they're one of those more dexterity. That's right.
Their key ability is strength or dexterity. So they could be like a rapier using Caden Kalian cleric, or a bow using cleric champion. Or a bow using a Rastal champion and have dexterity as their main
Because deities have a wide variety of favored weapons, so it makes a lot of sense for the champion to have strength or dexterity, so that it lends itself well to a lot of different fighting styles.
That's right. Your trained skills are religion, one determined by your deity. The cleric, as we're going to see next time on Class Chat, has that too. And then 2 more plus your intelligence modifier, which equals out to 4 skills plus your intelligence modifier in the end. Plus, of course, all your stuff from your background. As usual, you're trained in simple and martial weapons plus unarmed attacks, as well as all armor. Light, medium, heavy, all armor, and unarmored defense. Trained in your champion class DC, as well as divine spell attacks and divine spell DCs, because you're going to have some extra spell features, and that's why you wind up with both a class DC and a spell DC on the champion, which we did not see on any of our classes thus far. In the series, which we are going through alphabetically.
Yes.
So
because the idea there is it's a character that has some spellcasting powers without being a full-on spellcaster. So they're going to have abilities that are coming from both directions.
As you've come to expect at this point, probably that means that we're going to get Lightning Reflexes to put our Reflex back up to Expert, and we're going to get Juggernaut and Resolve to get a Master in Fortitude and Will later on, as well as Alertness to pick up Expert in Perception later on. We also scale up eventually to Master Weapon Proficiency, like most martial classes, and Greater Weapon Specialization, plus our Armor is without parallel. We're going to scale up to Legendary Armor at level 17. No other class gets that. Monks can get it in unarmored defense, but even if you try to use archetype shenanigans, the monk can't pull it off in armor. Champion can. So, champion, you're going to be very well defended. If you throw in a shield 2, you are going to be really hard to hit when that shield is up.
And champions often have a lot of interesting ways to make use of their higher defenses to assist them in protecting their shields and things like that to assist them in protecting their allies.
That's right. So champions have all those proficiency increases, but they also have a bunch of other things that you can find along the way. I'm going to get into the code a little bit later because that's actually a pretty complicated situation. I guess I said at the beginning of some of these other ones, like how Steven was the lead on the Alchemist, and some of the classes we haven't gotten to yet, just everybody worked on the Core 4. The Champion is a little bit interesting. There was some initial work, and I think Retributive Strike, and like a very small number of other things that Jason came up with. But he went to work on the Druid for a while, and I wound up doing almost all of the initial Champion work, but not all. So let's see, where are we? Yes, Champion. So we're gonna get a 3rd level Divine Ally, Blade, Shield, or Steed. This actually combines with Tenets to give you sort of 2 choices that can define you in different ways, although this one's not initial because it's chosen at level 3. Mm-hmm. The Blade can add on extra rune abilities that are on top of all of your other runes. The Shield can give you a shield that's really, really durable and protects you from more damage. And the Steed is going to give you a special mount companion that you can upgrade up even further with later feats.
And that's nice too because I know there's sort of a principle of trying not to overload that first level character with too many decisions that have to be made right out the gate before, for somebody who's playing who's new to the game, or for someone who's new to the class, or someone who's just trying to get a sense of the character before they decide, before they lock in how they're going to evolve the build and how they're going to have that character.
You're not going to be like, choose your tenant and choose your ally and choose this feat and choose all of these other things. You can ease your way in, and it's possible to get more than one of these if you take the right feats. For instance, the character that I was playing in my Monday game that we finished was Shield and Steed, although I may have wound up retraining to get the Steed from Cavalier Archetype eventually, due to just some other goodies from Cavalier that I wanted, like the ability to block, have my shield raise and have that applied to my mount automatically. But be that as it may, there's additional cool stuff that you get as you level up. So you start off with a champion's reaction. That is special, and it's different depending on what your cause and tenets are. So we're probably going to be forced to go into the cause and tenets in a moment. But as you get your champion's reaction improves at 9th level with Divine Smite. You get like a special extra benefit to it. And then again at 11th level with Exalt.
Yeah.
So it's actually really quick and sort of almost sudden, especially if you do your XP quickly in your group and you level up after only a few sessions, where it doesn't have anything and then it gets one improvement and then it gets another improvement again, and after that you get some really interesting options that you could do with your champion's reaction. And those are some of the main things that you automatically get, but you also get devotion spells, and then after that we'll go back to the tenets and the causes.
Sounds good.
Devotion spells are your focus spells. Just like the Bard, you have focus spells, even though you're not a pure spellcaster. You start off with the Lay on Hands focus spell, which is a really nice one-action, quick pop for some good healing, and then after you lay on hands on them, they get your target, if it's not you, gets a status bonus to armor class for the next turn. So you heal them up, and they're a little harder to take down with the status bonus. Very handy little focus spell. At level 19, you also automatically get the Hero's Defiance focus spell, where you just, as a free action, spend your focus points to recover a bunch of hit points instead of being dropped to 0. It's kind of like a free action Breath of Life as a focus point, whereas Breath of Life is a reaction. But to stop you from, since it's a free action, from just repeatedly triggering it multiple times if you have a lot of focus points, Cheating Death is difficult. You can't use it again until you refocus or the next time you prepare. Can't be used against Disintegrate or whatever, because there's no amount of Defiance where your little disintegrated particles are going to be like, but I'm a defiant disintegrating particles. Look at me. That's at level 19. Alright. So, as we've gone through a... Oh, and thanks for sending in a gift sub, Rico. Let me give you a little bit of XP. There we go. Alright, so we've gotten through most of the class features here that you automatically are going to get with the champion. So let's move on to the very last one that I saved for last, which is really the first choice you actually have to make, but there's a lot to talk about when we get into the champion's code and the champion's tenets. So, you follow a code of conduct, beginning with tenets shared by all champions of the alignment, such as good. Then it continues with tenets of your cause. Deities often add additional strictures. For instance, Torag's champions can't show mercy to enemies of their people, making it almost impossible for them to follow the Redeemer cause. Tenets are listed in orders of importance, starting with the most important. If a situation places two tenets in conflict, you aren't in a no-win situation. Instead, follow the more important tenet. For instance, as a paladin, if an evil king asked you if you're hiding refugees so you could execute them, you could lie to him, since the tenet against lying is less important than preventing harm to innocents. trying to subvert your code by creating a situation that forces a higher tenant to override a lower tenant, for example, promising not to respect authorities and then to keep your word disrespecting authorities, is a violation of the champion code.
So basically, don't cheese it out, but I really like that it... I mean, you certainly can't say that anything's ever going to get rid of the paladin arguments on the internet, right? But at the very least, it helps to explain sort of what to do in a lot of those paladin no-win situation threads, right? You know what order the tenants go in, and there's less of a sense of there's less of a sense of being able to get stuck in those impossible traps. Right. And I see that also back in the description of on that first page of the champion class and how they interact with others, that it's written in there that trying to get everyone else to believe and act as you do is specifically not part of what the champion class is expected.
You lead by example, not by requiring everybody to do things.
Yeah. And of course you're going to have those situations where other party members decide that the best way to do things is by sneaking around behind the paladin character's back while the paladin player snickers in the corner.
Although there are a few things your other party members can do that you actually have to stop them.
Yes.
But it's not like you have to stop them from doing anything that violates your code. It's that you have to stop them from doing something that your code says you have to stop no matter what. Such as if they're they're putting innocents up, connected to targets, and then firing arrows at them and throwing fireballs at them as target practice for fun. You have to stop them from doing that. But
that's the kind of thing that you wouldn't really want to see at a table anyway. And if your group has that at your table, you probably don't have a champion as a part of your party.
That's right. The way that this is all set up, and Rico mentions Asimov as a tension between the different ranks of tenants, and definitely, so when I came up with this as a way to sort of handle the paladin dilemmas that you see online, I was thinking of Asimov and some of the issues with the laws of robotics, but I made this up, sent it around, and especially checked with the organized play team, such as Linda, to say, hey, does this cover a lot of the situations that are commonly seen for organized play?
There's still a lot of room for interpretation when it comes to what extent or does a particular situation apply to a particular tenant.
Absolutely.
Or a particular tenant apply to a particular situation. The other way around, but
yes,
you get the point.
Yep. And so the different tenants and the different causes each have their own code. And so, for example, the tenets of good: never perform acts anathema to your deity or willingly commit an evil act, such as murder, torture, or casting of an evil spell, is number 1. Number 2, never knowingly harm an innocent or allow immediate harm to one through inaction when you know you could reasonably prevent it. This tenet doesn't force you to take action against possible harm to innocents at an indefinite time in the future or to sacrifice your life to protect them. And then the causes are where it gets interesting, because those are, we can all probably agree that good characters should do that. But then after that, you have some pretty big differences between the 3 main tenets of good champions. The paladin is lawful good, honorable, forthright, committed to pushing back the forces of cruelty. The paladin must act with honor, never take advantage of others, lying or cheating, and must respect lawful authority of legitimate leadership wherever you go and follow its laws.
But in all of these cases, the tenets that are based on the cause go in after the tenets of good.
Yes, in order going down.
Yes.
In order going down. That's very important. So, because of that fact, you are going to wind up in a situation where if your God's anathema or protecting innocent or acting with honor say that you need to, then you won't have to respect the lawful authority of legitimate leadership. The paladin has a special champion's reaction. It is one of the few that is a mix of defense into actual offense. Sort of the divinely smiting down those who attack your allies. So whenever your ally is going to be damaged by an enemy, you gain a huge amount of resistance to that, and then you make a melee strike if the foe is within reach. It's got a 15-foot range, so that's usually the case. Plus, there's a feat that lets you take a step before that, and then you can have an even higher chance of it. The 9th level Divine Smite adds persistent good damage equal to your Charisma modifier on the Retributive Strike, which is hugely good against creatures that are weak against good. And then Exalt lets everybody do the reaction at a -5 penalty. It's like, oh, you struck at this person, everyone's going to hit you. At a penalty, but still. Redeemer, neutral good. Definitely one of my favorites. You're full of kindness and forgiveness. You gain the Glimpse of Redemption Champion's reaction to lay on hands devotion spell. Same devotion spells before. You add the tenets instead of the paladin ones. You must first try to redeem those who commit evil acts rather than killing them or meting out punishment. If they then continue on a wicked path, you might need to take more extreme measures. And you must show compassion for others regardless of their authority or station. So that's the Redeemer. Their reaction, Glimpse of Redemption, gives the enemy a choice. Same sort of thing, 15-foot range. It's gonna either do a massive amount of resistance against all types of damage in the attack, just like the champion. And that will also make the enemy enfeebled 2 until the end of its next turn. So it's gonna have problems for the rest of this turn and the next turn in making more strength-based attacks at the very least. Or the enemy can choose to see the scenes of redemption and the weight of their sin and be like, you know what, I'm just gonna cancel that attack and not do any damage, and then they don't get enfeebled. And they could see like, oh, well, I hit for 15 and the champion blocked 13, so I'd rather not be enfeebled, and you can just not take the 2 damage. The Divine Smite is that if the foe rejects your Glimpse of Redemption, it's like, no, I'm still dealing the damage, then they take the persistent good damage equal to your Charisma modifier. Even more incentive to try to pull the attack. And the Exalt is that you can protect multiple allies. So if an area spell comes in or area effect, like some kind of a Dragon Breath, you're just like, everybody be redeemed, or get some redemption on the enemy and be resisting. The Liberator, probably the most powerful, but certainly the most underrated of the good champions, because people like making that strike, and the Glimpse of Redemption that can sometimes end the effect gets a lot of play, but the Liberator is so strong.
But before we get into that, for those who've been talking about the tenets, the Liberator very much, the Liberator very much is about respecting people's freedom to make choices and protecting and preserving individual liberties, and not engaging in never engaging in acts such as slavery that would impede that.
Yep, that's what you do. So it's actually harder than it sounds, because people might think, oh, playing a completely character is easy. I'm just nice and I do whatever I want. But respecting the choices others make over their own lives and not forcing them to act in a particular way or threatening them if they don't is so alien to most adventurers who are like completely wander into some new culture or city and are just like, we know best, you guys are all idiots and do exactly what we say or else.
Yeah.
Whenever they see someone who thinks differently to them, that's what most adventurers do. Not all adventurers. Certainly in you might play a game where they don't. And I know Linda and I do too, but it's kind of typical of like the adventurer mindset. The thing that gets adventurers kind of side at by villagers. Some people talk about adventurers being murder hobos, but I don't even know if I see adventurers that often going around and literally murdering
They very
people.
much have a sense that
it's
they're
still
the hero
more this,
of the story.
I'm the hero.
I'm the hero. I'm
You're the
right.
NPC.
You're
I'm
here.
right.
You're
Just
here
listen
to assist me on my journey.
Yes.
If I weren't here, everything would fall apart. That's why there's an adventure here, etc., etc.
That's right. And so it's actually pretty difficult for adventurers sometimes to hold fast to that Liberator code of respecting the choices that the others have made for their own lives. Demanding and fighting for others' freedom to make their own decisions and not liking slavery and tyranny, that's a little easier.
Yeah.
So here's their reaction. Here's where it tricks you, because it can trigger if an enemy grabs or grapples you or deals damage, so it has more triggers. And whether or not the damage adds resistance, whether or not it was damage or grabbing, they immediately can attempt to break free of effects grabbing, restraining, immobilizing, or paralyzing them. And so a lot of people are like, oh, well, that doesn't happen that often, so I'm not getting full value out of Liberating Step, and therefore it must be weak. The problem is that it's actually incredibly strong even if it didn't do that, because the next thing that happens is that the ally steps as a free action even if they didn't need to escape. And so the amount that this can wreck the turn of an opponent, unless they have such amount of reach that the step doesn't put you out of reach, for a melee opponent is pretty huge. Because if you think about it, the melee opponent walks up to your ally, swings, you drastically reduce the damage that the ally takes, and they step away, and there's no recourse. They can step, the enemy can step up, but that's the end of their turn. Even if the enemy started next to your ally, it still is going to deny them potentially a third attack or some other special option if they wind up needing to step in between. But it's even better if the ally participates with this by sort of making it so that the enemy is the one that has to advance. It's very, very good. It seems like some people in the chat, such as Stephen from Roll for Combat, agree that that ability is very good, and it definitely is. We have one in our Hell's Rebels game, and we had a Redeemer in War for the Crown, and I played a Paladin in a different game. We have champions a lot, and they help a lot. So those are the 3 good ones, but there's also 3 evil causes, and they are pretty evil. They start with, in fact, the tenets of evil, and the tenets of evil are much nastier than the tenets of good. You must never perform acts anathema to your deity, that's in there, or willingly commit a purely good act, such as giving something solely out of charity, casting a good spell, or using a good item. So, that you still can do something that's like, seems like it's good, but you're really connivingly being evil. You must never put another person's needs before your own, and you must never put your own needs before those of your deity. Though you can perform acts others might consider helpful, it must be done with the expectation that it ultimately furthers your own goals or those of your master. So that makes them not great cooperators unless they are furthering their own goals, but there's ways to make sure you are furthering your own goals and seem to be cooperating along. Then you get to add on some extra clauses depending on which of the 3 causes you are. So the Tyrant is the one that subjugates the weak, their lawful evil. Let no one who is lesser than you wield power over you or lead you. Mercilessly enforce established hierarchies of masters and servants, topple or seize control of illegitimate hierarchies such as democratic governments, or the arrogant echelons of the celestial planes, and fill power vacuums by taking that power for yourself. Bind the weak to serve you. This tenet doesn't require you to spare foes' lives if you think they would be disloyal if pressed into servitude, nor does it require you to keep more servants than you find practical or useful. So that's the Tyrant. You take control.
Very much, well, the Tyrant.
You're not just going to burn it all down. You want it to have it in your control, and that actually makes them a little easier to work along with groups than say the anti-Paladin, who we'll get to. And yes, it is. It's your Emperor Palpatine character.
So when you're talking about a little easier to work within groups, obviously they're not going to be able to get along so well with some of the good champions. But if you have a group that is generally of a more neutral bent, or the Tyrant is more secretive about some of the stuff that they're doing and believes that the party's missions ultimately fulfill their goals because maybe the group is going after some other evil force that happens to be a rival of the force that the Tyrant serves, and so they're working together toward a common goal.
That's right.
But definitely, as always with evil PCs, it's a matter for the GM and players to all work out together and make sure that everybody's comfortable with having something like that at the table.
So the Tyrant, like the Redeemer, offers a choice with their reaction Iron Command. If you dare to strike the Tyrant, then you must either kneel before the Tyrant or refuse to kneel and take mental damage. Plus, the Tyrant gets to deal extra damage to you on the Tyrant's next turn. Their Divine Smite adds persistent evil damage. Oh, right. We forgot the Divine Smite and Exalt of the Liberator. Divine Smite of the Liberator does persistent good damage if you actually broke out of grab, restrained, immobilized, or paralyzed. And Exalt lets the liberating step cause all of you and all of your allies to step as long as they're in the 15 feet, as long as it doesn't need to break free of an effect. So it just really moves everybody around. It's hilarious. The Tyrant's Divine Smite is persistent evil damage equal to your charisma modifier if it refuses to kneel before you.
Mm-hmm.
And the Exalt is that all the enemies that are within 15 feet must kneel before you would take the mental damage, but they only take minimum damage, and they don't take extra effects from feats that give more effects to the main person who... So they're probably not going to kneel. But maybe they will if they're really low.
They probably won't, but they'll probably just take
some damage. Yeah, absolutely. So then there's the Desecrator. So the Tyrant wants to take control of everything. The Desecrator is just kind of a selfish jerk who makes everything worse.
Mm-hmm.
That's their deal. They don't want to destroy everything. They don't want to control everything. They're a selfish jerk that makes everything worse. They only add one thing. Subvert or corrupt everything in your path that is pure and good, and sow doubt among those upholding such ideals. And the reaction is Selfish Shield. It doesn't do quite as much as the protective ones from the good champions, but it is like the protective ones from the good champions. It protects you from damage. You don't have to actually have an ally around, so it's it's harder to use one where you have to protect someone else. It's certainly easier to build a character that can synergize by just protecting yourself, and that is what... Because obviously you're going to be within 15 feet of yourself. You don't have to do any positioning, but you can protect yourself, and then you can do more damage to the person who dares attack your selfish face. And then your Divine Smite is you're even more selfish and can protect yourself from more damage, and your Exalt is... You're so selfish that all enemies within 15 feet take a penalty to attack you again after you use your Selfish Shield, because it's just full of such selfishness that it can protect you more. Then finally, the Anti-Paladin is all about destroying everything. In fact, their description is the exact opposite of the Paladin. You're dishonorable, dishonest, and committed to breaking the false hopes of kindness. Whereas the Paladin was honorable, forthright, and committed to pushing back the forces of cruelty.
Mm-hmm.
It's anti. You gain Destructive Vengeance reaction, and they get Touch of Corruption instead of Lay on Hands, which is a damaging alternative to Lay on Hands. It's basically the opposite of Lay on Hands.
And they're pretty much for their tenets is all about not binding themselves to any sort of law or code. Just be dishonorable and always
other than the
anti-paladin's codes. Just do whatever it takes to get what you want, destroying the things that stand in your way,
and everything that offends you.
Yes,
including perhaps especially the forces of good and law that oppose you. And just like the Paladin doesn't immediately have to try to go against some possible harm in the future, the anti-Paladin doesn't have to immediately destroy everything everywhere, especially if it could get you destroyed to try to do that, and it doesn't require you to destroy something that might be useful if you instead corrupted it. Mm-hmm. But you generally are going around destroying a lot of stuff, and their reaction is very damaging, but not only to your opponent, because instead of decreasing the amount of damage that something takes when you get hit, you increase the damage that you take, and the damage, and then you deal that and more to your opponent who hits you. Plus, you add a lot more extra damage onto attacks than the other evil champions. It's twice as much. So your Divine Smite does persistent evil damage to them, equal to your charisma modifier. It's no fuss. The others, a lot of them have conditionals and such. No, yeah, if they take the initial damage, they take it as well. And when you use Destructive Vengeance with the Exalt, each enemy within 15 feet of you other than the triggered creature takes half the damage of the triggering enemy of the same damage type you choose. Because you can choose between evil and negative, so that you can use negative damage to damage things that are not good.
Yes.
Now, if it happens to be both non-good and construct or undead, then you're out of luck. Just don't use the reaction then. But most things are some of those categories where you can damage them. So those are all the champion causes. There's also just a variety of champion feats that come from a few subcategories. Some of them are based on your cause, and they do something that upgrades an ability that only that cause has. Some are based on your divine ally, and they give you special things for your blade, shield, or your mount.
And some are based on the tenets. So you have the tenets of good or the tenets of evil. So there's a variety of oaths that you can swear to uphold a certain cause or to perform a certain deed that then give you benefits that are tied to that cause.
I wouldn't say the ones that require the tenets are really completely based on the tenets necessarily, but there certainly are a lot that have that. That's more of future-proofing feats that don't make sense.
Yeah.
Whereas the ones that require a cause, they really are like based on that cause, and they have an ability that just like couldn't work for any other cause. But the tenets definitely have the oaths, like Linda mentioned, are a major sort of level 2 thing where you can swear an additional oath, which actually adds more. That one is based on the tenets because it adds more.
Yeah.
It adds more. What do you call them? Little bullet points to the end of your tenets. Some of the other ones that require tenets of code are not as tenets of good or evil are not as much based on the tenets, like Aura of Courage. Doesn't do anything with the tenets, but it's about the good ones have Aura of Courage and the evil ones have Aura of Despair because it's just sort of like the evil version. Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of thematic feats in there. There's mercies, which allow you to use your lay on hands to like remove some negative conditions, which is pretty handy for a focus spell. Plus, of course, the evil champions who can do evil things to people, and there's also some feats that can allow you to sense good or sense evil as almost like a smell that just like, something evil's in here or something. Plus additional focus spells that are not land hands, such as litanies, which are generally one action verbal only focus spells that do some kind of effect for a short time, like the litany against sloth that can stop your enemies from using reactions and possibly slow them. And it's extra good against particularly slothful creatures like sloth demons.
Kitsune Warlock said the true secret feature of the champion, unlimited between combat healing without medicine checks. Yes, that's.
I mean, there's more than just the champion that can do that.
Yeah, but that is certainly one of the things that we that our groups have made great use of.
Yep.
With the champions that we've had.
But bards, witches, there are a lot of classes that can get a healing focus spell, and once you have that, you can do it. Certain types of druids. It's certainly something champions always have, though, so that's handy to know. Rex Liquid says, I like the flavor of Sense Evil. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think Sense Good has an even better one, which is the presence of goodness sickens you with its saccharine self-righteousness. It's something good is around here. It's so there's additional feats as well that can, for instance, give you big attacks when you're using the blade ally, or give you like a combined shield block plus champion's reaction for a shield ally. Mm-hmm. Super cool mounts.
They're ones that augment your ones that augment the abilities from your cause in particular.
Mm-hmm. There's usually one at level 1, and then there's sometimes also one that is higher level than that as well. I think everyone has one at level 1. Mm-hmm. And then there's just some ridiculous stuff that you can eventually do, like just turn yourself into an angel, or get yourself a ridiculous amount of resistance against physical damage by creatures and effects opposed to your tenets. Also, that's part of the level 20 Sacred Defender, which has a ability that usually won't come up in the game, but is humorously great for theory crafting, which is effects that roll a natural 20 on an attack roll don't improve the result by 1 degree of success, which means that if you can get enough AC that their 20 doesn't hit you, you can confidently state that you automatically win.
Yes.
Like, yeah, there's 1,000 archers who I know even on a 20 can't hit me, so I just defeat them. I'm a Sacred Defender, level 20 champion. That's just my thing. That's just gonna happen. So there's a lot of interesting things that you can do with your champion. Let's talk a bit about the champion multiclass, like we do with all of the classes multiclass. So the champion multiclass, let's get the art for the champion. All right. So the champion multi-class, here we could see it's wielding that giant flaming sword with a halo. It is a solid multi-class. That is, in fact, when we say we had a Redeemer in War for the Crown, it was a Bard with the Redeemer champion multi-class who was very Redeemer-y. Actually changed classes a few times, but always had the Redeemer dedication.
Yeah.
Ever since level 2. We did some rebuilding because it was during the playtest for a while. So you can get heavy armor and get it up to expert with diverse armor expert. You can also pick up the main attractions are, in addition to getting feats, which you can do with every multi-class, and there's hit points, which you can tend to do with any multi-class that has 10 hit points or more. You can also pick up Healing Touch, which gives you Lay on Hands, which is a nice one. And you can pick up Champion's Reaction at level 6, which is very, very powerful reaction. Or at level 6, a Divine Ally.
So as part of the synergies with this, certainly we mentioned Bard, and Bard is a great one because they've got the charisma, and they also can naturally be someone who's going into melee. And the champion dedication requires both strength and charisma.
Yes, the charisma requirement makes it challenging if you don't already plan on getting 14 charisma, but Bard's sorcerers good at taking the champion dedication.
Mm-hmm.
Or really, even clerics probably have close to enough charisma, although they might balk at the strength requirement unless they are a very particular strength charisma wisdom build, which you can do. Your con will usually be rough at early levels, but the champion multiclass can help you with that potentially by getting you up to heavy armor, and so that you can ignore your dexterity a little more, and it can give you a really nice reaction.
Yeah, and I mean other people who are already going to invest in strength and want to be sociable, want to have their character be sociable, can go with that pretty well.
Yep. Also, Swashbuckler Liberator multi-class on don't sleep on that if you have a deity. A lot of the deities who allow Liberators also are pretty thematically good for Swashbucklers.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have some charisma from being a Swashbuckler, and the extra movement from Liberator,
or like a Liberator Rogue.
Or a rogue with Liberator multi-class.
Yeah.
Yeah, potentially. Absolutely. You could do it with the Ruffian.
The Ruffian, who has a strength-based and then has sort of that additional mobility. That's right. A Liberator rogue who venerates Caden Kalian, something like that.
And for the Swashbuckler, if you're a gymnast who are secondary strength, it's actually pretty handy as well. It's easy to get in, relatively compared to some other classes. Honestly, if you can get into champion multi-class, it tends to be useful. If you already have heavy armor, perhaps the dedication is not as useful to you as it would be otherwise. But there's still so many good things in it. Then again, like some of the only people who have heavy armor are fighters who also have pretty good reactions. I would say maybe not as good as the champion's reaction, but attack of opportunity is still pretty handy. Let's see. Katrina in chat says Cloister Cleric has champion dedication. Hadn't thought of it for Spirit Barbarian. Yeah, it can absolutely work with Spirit Barbarian. Once you have decided to go into some charisma, and certainly you could do that that could sort of fit with the idea of a Spirit Barbarian pretty well, then it's going to be potentially a pretty nice mix. And of course, as Consuming Warlock said, the Oracle. Yep. Just like Bard and Sorcerer, they're going to have the charisma. So it fits in pretty well, pretty easily for them. And getting that extra armor can definitely be helpful. It's actually pretty handy for maybe like Ancestors Mystery, where one of your ancestors is always freaking out and trying to get you to fight with a weapon. And you're like, okay, but I've got some armor, so that's gonna help when I fight with a weapon. There's a lot of fun things you can do there with champion.
And what about when you're sort of the champion as the baseline? Some other archetypes. I know you mentioned the Cavalier. Cavaliers also have that theme of pledging themselves to a cause, so it's a pretty natural fit. Yep.
There's some good ones. Also, like champions can actually work well with a variety of archetypes because they're just so defensive both from themselves and being able to protect the party that throwing like almost anything else onto them tends to combine well. The question just becomes which archetypes can you take and how can you fit that in? Like for my Cavalier, using Cavalier archetype and the shield feats I wanted to take, that basically my feats were spoken for at that point in time. Because there were some really good shield feats and Cavalier had some too, and I wanted to protect my animal companion and boost it up. And so between the two of those, it was fairly feat intensive. As long as you have the feats for it, though, you can go into something like a spellcaster like Cleric, since you have innate progression of divine spells anyway, and Cleric Dedication does alright and gets some extra spells. You could throw in on a fighting style based one and pick up some additional fighting style based feats. So like if you're like a dual wielding champion and you want to get some of those dual wielding feats, you don't have that many innate ones in your class to begin with. You could take Monk if you're a champion of Aurori or something like that and do some flurries of blows. It can be pretty handy for you.
You could be a marshal who is inspiring people who are really close to you, and then use that together with your defensive abilities to have this formation where you're both defending people and rallying them to battle.
That's right. Monk is pretty useful also because if you can pick up Flurry at level 10, then that gives you a sort of an action economy booster, and that can make it easier for you if you are doing some things like raising your shield a lot or commanding around your mounts. It can make sure that you can have more actions for more things while still making a bunch of attacks. And like you said before, with Rogue Champion, you could go Champion Rogue,
yes.
Not only to pick up more skills, but also to get Sneak Attack if your deity's favorite weapon. If you are a Caden Kalian champion and you've got the rapier, then why not take another d6 damage with it? You're likely to be going in there with allies nearby, so you might be able to get the flank. So really, champion pretty much goes well with whatever you want to take with it because of the fact that nobody's ever gonna be unhappy to, even if you already have a party with a fair number of champions, you're not going to be unhappy to pick up another champion who can significantly decrease the damage coming in, heal party members, and really stand the line because of the fact that it just sort of smooths over the situation for your team in combat. Like, obviously, yes, if you have 4 champions and you're getting a 5th person, you'd probably rather pick someone who can do other things because you're going to have some major blind spots. But there still is something that 5th champion might be able to do, and certainly a team of all champions would be very frustrating for opponents because there's always going to be somebody who has the champion's reaction left over to react. Do you
do as much damage as some other parties? Maybe not, but do you tank for a very, very long time?
Yeah. Oh yeah, you tank pretty much forever, and they will have a lot of trouble damaging you, and you'll be very good against evil opponents if you're all tenets of good. All right, so that's the champion in a nutshell, or out of the nutshell, or wherever we are right now. That's where the champion is. Let's see. Are there any other
weapon style archetypes?
I don't think I see any other questions here about
Sounds
the champion.
Good. So let's go ahead and say goodbye to YouTube.
All right, bye YouTube. See you next time.
Bye.